Since the earliest days, man has believed in the existence of a soul and sought to define it. Native Americans have long used a powerful method of searching for the soul, the vision quest. A vision quester will often travel great distances to find a sacred place where he can explore his innermost self. There, he will confine himself to a small circle, living without food and water for several days. Alone, without the distractions of society, he hopes to receive a vision providing a glimpse into a mysterious part of himself, his soul. No matter the belief system, most people feel that they possess some kind of soul.
For centuries now, people have been talking about the death of God, that as humanity continues to evolve, as human societies become more rational, more scientific, that God or religion or spirituality will be replaced by reason. But that has not happened by any means.
In a global poll taken at the turn of the millennium, 96% of those surveyed said they believed in God.
Spirituality is ascendant. People, regardless of how modern or sophisticated or rational they become, continue to believe in the notion of not just an afterlife, but an other life. The idea that there is something beyond the material realm.
Yeah, what I would like to know is, what is the soul?
The soul is pretty much who you are as a person, how you feel, how you act.
The soul is something deep inside you that's connected with the rest of the universe.
I think the soul is your inner being.
Early indigenous faiths claimed the true path to the soul was in nature. These days, religion, meditation, and even exercise are thought to be ways to the soul. In this century, the search takes many forms. Some borrow from ancient wisdom, like these modern-day vision questers gathered in the Arizona desert.
If you travel the world over and you look throughout time, you'll find that there are forms of vision quest in really all cultures.
Jonathan Ellerby, a spiritual guide, leads the group. He uses what he's learned from other cultures to help people in their quests.
I'd say that vision quest, in its simplest form, is the human quest to connect to their true self and higher power through solitude and nature.
These three people have decided to undergo the difficult trials of the ancient vision questers. They will participate in several rituals before a Native American elder leads them further in their journey into the desert.
My name is Joyce. I grew up in New Jersey. I'm an architect and a caregiver.
Joyce and her fellow questers are at a crossroads in their lives.
My husband's sick. I guess it's a time. Well, he's been out of the hospital a week now, so a time to think about myself for a change. I believe it's important to learn about my soul, to live deeply and meaningfully.
My name is Robert Putt, and I currently live in Tucson. I used to be in sales for a software company. I started looking around me at the folks that I worked with and saw that I'd probably just keel over from a heart attack. For me, the purpose of this is to refocus my life, figure out where I'm going to go next.
I'm Johanna. I'm going to nursing school, and I have a background as a midwife and a yoga teacher. I know that we are all our soul all the time. That is this inextinguishable essence of who we all are, and most of the time we're not in touch with that really at all, and this is a process that will support me in knowing myself better.
These latter-day vision questers hope that their isolation in this natural setting will allow them to touch their soul. But why did human beings first begin to believe in the soul? The answer may be found in caves used thousands of years ago. In these caves are the remains of the dead, but this is no simple resting ground. These people have been buried with obvious attention to ritual. Their limbs are ceremoniously arranged, the corpses laid to rest with jewelry. On the walls is evidence that centuries before the first organized religion, early man believed in some sort of afterlife.
Around these niches are dramatic drawings of the soul being reanimated in another realm.
The other realm looked much like their world. The dead were seen hunting, gathering, living the same lives they had on Earth. Yet something of them had moved on to a different plane.
All of this indicates an awareness in ancient man that there was some principle of the human being that continued to exist beyond this material world. That principle will one day be known as the soul.
In 1871, British anthropologist Sir Edward Tyler theorized in his book Primitive Culture that human beings began to believe in the ghosts of their ancestors as a result of encountering them in their dreams.
So when prehistoric man would go to sleep and would have dreams in which ancestors would return to them, or dreams in which they themselves would move forward in time or backward in time, these dream experiences were the experiences of the soul, which would escape the body while one was asleep.
Another theory suggests the roots of the soul can be found in supernaturalism, an awareness of the unexplained. As mankind evolved, people saw that there were forces at work beyond their control. The realization brought a new way of viewing life. It was man's sense of awe at nature that led to mythologies and legends to explain the way the world worked and his place in it.
And in those myths, the concept of a soul begins to form.
In Arizona, the vision questers are learning some of those well-told stories. As part of their preparations, they're making green and blue prayer flags. The green symbolizes the natural world, and the blue, the spiritual side.
When we come out of this ceremony today, you will be a little more in the blue than the green. You're going to be a little more connected into the spirit world than you are on a normal basis. And it'll stay like that until you go out to your spot, until we bring you back.
In the traditional belief system they're following, everything has a soul. Anthropologists call this animism.
Behind this material world, there is an animating, creative spirit. And that spirit exists in all things, in the trees, in the rocks, in the earth, the waters, the sky. Everything has an animating spirit within it that is essentially its true self.
In order to communicate with these spirits, a special class of people known as shamans rose to prominence. They served as a bridge between the living and the dead.
They changed their state of consciousness by drugs, by dancing, by drumming, by dreaming, and get information that other members of the community don't have. Now, the purpose is to demonstrate to the people in the congregation that there is a soul, that there is life after death.
The shamans' practices are still in use, and the vision questers are following in their path. They prepare for their spiritual journey with an ancient purification ritual involving intense heat and complete darkness. They enter a ceremonial sweat lodge, an important step in soul searching, common to many cultures.
At the very core, it's about preparing the spirit. It's about helping people to release emotionally and mentally the busyness of the mind.
In this ceremony, everything is planned, from the way the lodge is entered to when and how many rocks are brought in to create the steam.
And when that door is closed, then we enter into a process of prayer, and prayer happens through words, it happens through song. What is experienced in there is really beyond what we can explain through physics or biology. There's a certain power that is engaged in that ceremony that transforms us and it cleans us.
This is a challenging time for the vision questers as they seek to learn more about themselves. Many people believe purification rites like these connect people to their souls. In the Arizona desert, the Vision Questers continue their search for the soul. Inside the ceremonial spirit lodge, they pour water over hot rocks to create intense heat. The group chants and prays in complete darkness. After 2 hours, they emerge. The first step in the quest has been completed. They've spent a week fasting and preparing mentally, asking themselves questions to awaken their spiritual side.
I think the interesting thing would be to find out where does the soul come from?
Their guide has much more planned for them.
One of the traditions that I have been taught through Shona healer in Zimbabwe is a process of ceremony through the water.
All of the rituals being undertaken are designed to open the questers to receiving a new experience. They hope to see a vision while alone in the desert.
When the body and the mind reach their limits, the spirit steps forward.
I'm trying now to think of babies, and before they have personalities, they seem to have a soul. They seem to have some sort of energy.
I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Are we born with a soul, or does it develop later in life? Is it a form of energy, or is it simply the essence of our personalities? These questions divide the world's major religions.
Different cultures, different belief systems will ascribe different origins to soul. The soul comes from a sacred mountain, and it returns to that sacred mountain. Or it comes from Mother Earth, and it returns to Mother Earth. Or the soul comes from God, and it goes to heaven or to a less desirable place after death.
According to Christian theology, God fashioned the first human being out of the ordinary stuff of the earth. God breathes life into that dust, and the life that God shares with that first human being is God's own life. The book of Genesis tells us that we are ensouled beings, that we are distinctively fashioned after God's own image and likeness, that there's something special about the kinds of creatures whom we are.
The idea of God breathing the divine into man is not unique to Christianity.
God formed our physical creations in the beginning, and when he completed that, he was breathing something of his own spirit, called ruh, into that body.
Islam teaches that an angel brings that spirit to the baby in the mother's womb at the end of the first trimester. In the Jewish faith, it enters the fetus earlier, 40 days after conception.
In Judaism, and in fact in Islam, the soul, what in Hebrew is referred to as nefesh, and in Arabic is referred to as ruh, it is the breath of God.
That breath is known by many different names. In China, the chi. In Sanskrit, the prana. But few religions agree on exactly what is breathed into the human body. Christianity takes its understanding of the soul from the ancient Greeks. To them, the soul is not part of the divine force that gives the universe life. It belongs specifically to the individual. 400 years before Christ, Plato theorized that the soul existed separately from the body. He divided it into three parts: the logos, or mind, for reasoning; the thymos, where ego and emotion resided; and pathos, where appetite or desire was located.
Christian beliefs about the soul wind up emerging from Greek philosophy that understood a mind-body duality or a body-soul duality. Christians don't believe that the soul is mere energy.
I believe a soul is something that we are given, that God designates to each one individually.
This perception of the soul as an individual's persona given by God, rather than the pure spirit of God or divine energy, separates Christianity from much of the world.
The soul is the continuity of mind, consciousness. It's not an individual or an individual identity. It's a continuance of your awareness.
Buddhists do not explain about the soul. Buddhists believe in their minds.
In Buddhist philosophy, the I, the self, is an illusion.
So-called self or soul is a certain belief only. There is nothing to say so.
And while there is a conception of reincarnation, that part of me does continue to move on, that's vastly different than the Christian concept of the soul as an immortal essence.
In Buddhism, reincarnation is a process that ends only when the most advanced stage of enlightenment is reached, nirvana. But the part of man that is reincarnated is less of an individual soul than it is energy transferred from one life to another. The idea of the self does not exist in Buddhism. It has no place in what followers call samsara, the endless cycle of birth, suffering, death, and rebirth. That sacred cycle is about the continuation of a psychic presence, an energy that transcends any one human being. Hinduism, a religion that precedes Buddhism by centuries, does allow for an individual soul, the jiva.
The idea of the jiva as the reincarnated self has a lot to do with the Hindu concept of karma. It is one's actions, one's words, one's deeds that define how one is born again, and that is karma.
In Hinduism, the soul is born again and again in different forms, including animals. It must continue the cycle until achieving perfection and reuniting with the divine source. Does the soul stand alone, possessed by one individual, or is it part of an energy force that holds the universe together? This essential question divides Eastern and Western beliefs. The idea that the soul is connected to the universe is shared by many cultures. Attempting to achieve that connection, the contemporary vision questers meet with Don Lorenzo, a traditional Native American elder. He will teach them some of the traditional ways of his people before leading them into the desert.
I'm awakening the spirit of this with my own spirit. Remember, breath is spirit. So I'm using my spirit. I guess you could say, if you had to put it into words, the soul is the part of me that is connected to the allness of things, the part of me that is undefined, the part of me that isn't contained and doesn't belong in any matrix or box.
Where does the soul come from is really, I'd say, the same question as where does the soul go? Which is that it comes from this ultimate source, whether you call it a unified field of being, or God, spirit, or energy.
If the spirit is energy that survives death, where does it go? Is it possible that it comes back as another life? There are many notions of where the soul goes after death. Some believe it moves on to an afterlife. Others, that the spirit returns to the mortal realm, to live again. And then there are those who believe in ghosts that must be appeased by the living. Many Native Americans feel that the spirits of their ancestors are all around them. To spiritual guide Don Lorenzo, this desert is filled with countless spirits. He explains to the vision questers that by tradition they must first announce their presence to them.
Believe me when I tell you that there are spirits here, that you're being watched.
Rituals centered on worshiping the spirits of the departed began 30,000 years ago. From Asia to Africa to the American Southwest, the belief that ancestors maintain a powerful presence is still very much alive. That life force is called mana. With death, the mana is released from the body. If an ancestor's soul is neglected, it could bring serious misfortune to the living. So these spirits must be treated with respect. Similar traditions are found in many societies. In Celtic lore, a western window is left open to invite the deceased loved one in. A candle is left burning to light the way. Food is offered to sustain the soul in the afterlife in Asia and Africa, and in return, that spirit watches over the descendant. At the Jewish Passover dinner, the door is opened and a glass of wine poured for the prophet Elijah. Whether a culture acknowledges the spirits of the departed by meditation, prayer, or ritual offerings, through the desire to communicate with the dead, the concept of a soul emerged.
If we can commune with them, then they must still exist in some form. That form, of course, will eventually be called the soul, the immortal self.
Creator, I honor divine spirits.
To introduce themselves to the sacred place they are visiting, the questors are invited to sing a song representing their own spirits. As they take part in the ceremony to honor the ancestors, their thoughts turn to the ultimate fate of their souls.
When we die, the physical body is just the vessel and the soul is free.
My main curiosity is how long it lasts after we're no longer breathing. Does it re-enter other souls? Does it just fragment into particles? I don't know.
Being brought up in a religious background, heaven and hell is another big thing. You know, heaven is a place where their soul is complete, and hell would be the opposite of that. Whether it's here on earth, under the ground, up in the sky, I don't have a definition on that.
The idea of a destination for the soul in the afterlife is a central feature of many religions. The ancient Egyptians believed that after death, the soul embarked on a perilous journey across the river of death and over a lake of fire into the hall of Osiris. There it was judged. If a good life had been led, an everlasting next world awaited. If the soul was tainted by sinful activity, total destruction was the punishment. Greek philosophers like Plato and Pythagoras also believed in the judgment of the dead. The blessed are sent to a paradise called Elysium. The sinful are cast down into Tartarus, the deepest abyss of the earth. This mythology reveals a long-held awareness that the behavior of mortals could determine their fate in the afterlife.
Human beings were created by God with free will that also makes it possible for us, tragically, to choose not to love.
One of Catholicism's primary beliefs is that people are born with original sin. Muslims believe the soul is pure at birth, but from that moment it is locked in a never-ending war. The battle is between the pure breath of God and the self, which can turn from that purity and commit sin. This struggle is called jihad, a word that has come to mean something very different in the 21st century.
So jihad is not about fighting. The most important jihad in Islam is purification of soul.
According to the writings of Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, after leading his followers in combat, said to one of his companions that they had returned from the lesser battle to face a greater one.
So the companion was surprised, what kind of jihad we are going to do again? There are a lot of Muslim killers in the battlefield. He said, jihadun nafs, jihad against our own soul. It means jihad against our bad desires in order to protect the pure soul, our spirituality, our ruh.
Some scholars believe that this battle between good and evil within ourselves and between God and the devil can be traced back to 1200 BC and the Iranian prophet Zarathustra. Zarathustra proclaimed that there were two primordial spirits who were engaged in a cosmic war for souls.
According to Zarathustra, we could contribute to this cosmic war through our own good deeds, good words, good thoughts, and that how we acted on earth affected this cosmic battle taking place in the heavens.
If there is a battle over our souls, after it's over, where will that soul finally go?
I think it goes with us to heaven. I think the soul comes with us.
The body is mortal. The body dies. And yet the death of the body, according to the basics of Christian faith, is not the end of the story.
Christianity follows the same pattern of judgment as the Egyptians and the Greeks. A worthy soul ascends to heaven, the kingdom of God often depicted as a paradise filled with beautiful plants and animals.
Heaven, as that condition, that state of being, that way of living in perfect communion with God.
The unworthy spirit is cast down into hell, viewed as an underground world where the devil inflicts torture on the damned.
Hell, that condition of the freely chosen and freely willed desire to live apart from the presence of God.
For Christians and Muslims, sin determines a soul's fate. For Hindus and Buddhists, the spirit's final destination is decided by karma. During a cremation ceremony, certain Hindu sects crack open the skulls of the dead so the soul can escape. Once freed from the body, the spirit will be reincarnated. In what form depends on the actions of the person. A well-lived life is rewarded with reincarnation to a higher level of being, otherwise as a lesser being. Tibetan Buddhists do not believe in any of these punishments or judgments. To them, there is no heaven or hell. The goal of the Tibetan Buddhist is the realization that physical life and human emotions are merely illusions. After death, if the spirit of the departed has this awareness, it enters the blissful state of nirvana. If not, it is reincarnated and returns to earth again. Despite the wide variety of interpretations, there are common threads to theories of the life of the soul.
There's an aspect of the soul that maintains some integrity, almost like an energetic footprint or blueprint of the person that somehow migrates into another level of energy. And so we use metaphors to describe where they go, back to the light, back to God. We have words like heaven and the happy hunting grounds.
Maybe what we consider the soul going somewhere isn't really doing anything at all, but just shifting. Maybe what we call the soul leaving is nothing more than a shifting of vibration.
Don Lorenzo and the Vision Questers arrive at a sacred place in the desert, the home of one of its greatest spirits, a grandfather saguaro cactus more than 100 years old. Don Lorenzo will seek guidance from this venerated guardian and use its wisdom to place the Vision Questers for the night. These searchers are in pursuit of answers from within, like others who came before them. What did these historic questers find? And was the world ready to hear it? In a vision quest, each individual seeks to find a way to get in touch with their soul. The key elements are solitude and a form of sensory deprivation through fasting and staying within a restricted area, sometimes for days, without sleep. A vision quest is often prompted by a personal crisis.
Sooner or later, everyone will come to a place in their life when they will begin to question whether those things that we pursue in our lives are feeding my soul or feeding my spirit.
What insight has been gained from delving deeply into the soul in this way?
All our great teachers were vision questers. If you think of Moses or Jesus or Buddha, Muhammad, they were all vision questers, just as Black Elk and Sitting Bull.
One of the most renowned searchers was a Spanish monk who became known as St. John of the Cross. Born in 1542, John of the Cross joined the Carmelite order, where he became involved in a movement to reform the group and return it to its old ways, to an austere life of denial, poverty, and contemplation.
This didn't make John especially popular with some of his contemporaries.
John was taken prisoner by other Carmelites and held in solitary confinement for 9 months. His cell had only a single window to let in light.
And under these conditions, John was beaten, John was deprived of food and water, John was tortured by being isolated from his community, isolated from other human contact. He's reduced to the nakedness, as it were, of his soul, to the essence, as it were, of his person.
While he was imprisoned, he composed his best-known poem, The Dark Night.
One dark night, fired with love's urgent longings, ah, the sheer grace.
John describes the difficult journey towards faith. That journey has since become known as the dark night of the soul, and may hold lessons for the vision questers.
The dark night of the soul even involves some extraordinary doubt. Anytime we come into a deeper and truer understanding of ourselves, that we need to go through almost like a disintegration so that the deeper self, the true self, can emerge.
Looking for a path to the divine is nothing new. 2,600 years ago, a young prince in India set out to uncover the truth about the universe. His name was Siddhartha.
Prince Siddhartha was born to a certain royal family in India. He wanted to know why people die, why people suffer, what will happen to people after their death.
Siddhartha gave up his luxurious life and dedicated himself to the search for answers. He met with all the religious leaders he could find, but felt he was no closer to the truth. He turned inward to fasting and meditation.
Then he understood that the suffering comes to us because of our craving. So he decided to find out the way to eradicate the craving.
Finally, he found a way to eliminate desire by dedicating himself to virtue and increased awareness.
Then he himself realized all these things are naturally depend upon the delusion of the people. So if you eradicate delusion, then spontaneously the craving and everything will disappear. So he did it by understanding. This is actually his attainment of enlightenment. After that, he was known as the Buddha.
Siddhartha attained enlightenment. For others, the pursuit of knowledge has had dire consequences. A chilling example of this is the story of the 10th century Sufi martyr El-Hallaj. For El-Hallaj, who followed the mystical tradition of the Muslim faith, there is a battle for the heart of the soul. When El-Hallaj concluded that his soul was the pure breath of God, that he was filled with divinity, he believed the battle within himself had already been won.
One day, he jumped into the crowded marketplace of ancient Baghdad and began shouting, Ana al-Haq, Ana al-Haq, I am the truth, I am the truth, by which of course he meant, I am God.
This blasphemy earned him the wrath of the authorities. When he refused to recant his statements, El-Hallaj was drawn and quartered, crucified and burned, and his ashes were scattered in the Tigris River. Some scholars believe that he was not actually proclaiming himself to be God.
When he said, I am God, what he meant is that myself has been annihilated. I no longer exist. The only thing that exists in me is the ruh, the breath of God. And as such, there is nothing separating me, Al-Hallaj, from God. I am God.
El-Hallaj may have discovered an essential truth, but he paid for that knowledge with his life. In Arizona, the vision questers also seek truth. For them, that may not mean passing through a crisis like St. John of the Cross, or striving for understanding of the universe like Siddhartha, but they are prepared for an intense experience.
Vision quest really means I seek to understand my true voice. People that seek these kinds of things have become so distracted that they can no longer recognize their own truth or their own voice because it's mixed with the voice of the world.
The vision questers arrive at the high point of their journey, their own dark night of the soul in the desert. They are each confined to a sacred rock.
My biggest fear, honestly, is that I'm going to go out there and just be hot and uncomfortable for 24 hours and nothing will happen.
There are times when I ignore my soul and other people's souls, and that almost diminishes its power. Souls don't really mean that much unless they're connecting, unless we're connecting to them and they're connecting to us.
You know, when we get to that point of just seeing ourselves in our rawest nature, I know it's going to be a really transformative experience.
They have fasted, taken part in purification rites, and are about to spend the night alone. Will they find the answers they are looking for? In the West, New Age groups are attracting more people to their ranks. But are their beliefs truly new, since they draw on ideas and practices that have deep roots in early attempts to get closer to the soul? In Arizona, the vision questers have tried to tap into those ancient rites.
There are many rituals around the world that bring people close to the spirit world, or they even enhance their own soul.
Santeria is a religion created by slaves in the New World. Forbidden to worship in their own way, the slaves disguised their West African gods as Catholic saints. Santeria is a so-called trance religion, where the ceremonies are meant to bring the participants, particularly the shamans, into contact with their gods by actually taking the spirits of those gods into their bodies. This is one way to commune with the soul.
Music is a very important part of the rituals because drumming, chanting, any type of music, even orchestral music in a great symphony can provide a spiritual experience for people and can nourish the soul.
Music as a specific human language puts us in touch with a dimension of reality that is beyond our ordinary everyday experience. And certainly composers of religious music, say Mozart, say Bach, put us in touch with spiritual realities, put us in touch with the essence of the soul and the essence of the soul's yearning for God in ways that go beyond what ordinary language can make it possible for us to access.
Chanting is one way of altering a person's consciousness, just like prayer, just like any type of repetitive music or sound.
When monks chant the divine office, they're actually setting the poetic words of sacred scripture to music, so that this poetry of the soul really becomes part of the way in which we come to see the spiritual life.
If music, chanting, and prayer all touch something deep inside, then art and architecture are ways that people externalize their feelings about the soul, and in doing so, inspire others to feel closer to it. Visual artists have long attempted to give life to the unseen and unknown.
Many artists have come up with very beautiful renditions of angels, of spirits, of the soul leaving the body.
The soul doesn't really have a look.
Soul is something like a light, luminous light.
The way in which those physical representations allow for meditation. All of these things are essentially avenues through which either the soul can be released or through which the soul can commune.
If we take the great Gothic cathedrals of the Middle Ages, for example, we're looking at structures that were built at a time when life was extraordinarily tedious for most people, at a time when most people, in fact, knew neither how to read nor to write.
The poor people would come to a cathedral, smell the incense, hear the gongs, see the stained glass. They would have an aesthetic experience. This is the highlight of the week for them. And so there are ways that these rituals, Eastern or Western, Northern or Southern, are meant to cultivate the soul.
The paths to get closer to the soul may spring from solitary pursuits to communal gatherings, to even the most intimate form of connection.
We hear the idea of soulmates, people who have lived together, who have loved together, who have slept together. Well, if the soul is the deepest, most sacred part of ourselves, sex is one of many, many ways that two people can merge and join in a spirit of love, and this is nourishing to both of their souls. In indigenous traditions, you have people who are lovers, who are newlyweds or newly engaged, given a private place for their sexual experience, usually their first sexual experience, that has been blessed, that is sacred, that is holy, that is a temple. So sex can be ritualized, sex can become part of this whole search for the soul.
Prayer, music, art, even intimacy, and the rituals associated with them are all ways people try to make contact with a dimension beyond the material world. In the desert, the vision questers have spent a long night of solitude. Their spiritual guides greet them with a ceremonial song.
You can't sit in nature without you being transformed in some way. The reason it's called a vision is because it comes from a place that is undefinable. So transformation is very personal.
I would definitely say I got closer to my soul. Yes, I had a couple different visions and different experiences. Reconnected with pieces of me that I had forgotten about. It was everything I thought it would be, and then more.
The vision questers gather together to reflect on their experiences.
I mean, I feel completely changed and completely transformed. I felt closer to myself, a closer connection to myself and to all beings. It feels peaceful. But I do feel just a deeper connection to my soul.
I believe my soul is larger and is more connected than I ever dreamed. Connected to all the other souls.
Joyce and the others describe an emotional night alone with their thoughts.
Maybe it was just a particularly vivid dream, but it felt pretty strong and clear and useful. It was strengthening.
Many still find support and inspiration from following the old ways.
We're a part of all this, and yet most of us really never spent any time with all this. We're inevitably drawn to nature. Nature is ultimate truth.
Age-old traditions are not falling by the wayside, they are gaining in popularity.
The soul is the deepest part, the most sacred part, even, of each individual's psyche. You get close to the soul through prayer, through meditation, through walking in nature, looking at great art, by helping people in need, by contemplation inwardly, and exhibiting love and compassion outwardly. That, to me, is the function of the soul.
What indigenous traditions have always known is that there is a hidden dimension to everything, and we call that spirit in the spiritual world, and I guess they call that energy in the world of science.
Science may have something to offer in this search. Will technological advancements take us further away from spirituality or bring us closer?
The more we search for these answers in the scientific realm, the more we recognize how much the scientific language, the scientific answers to these existential questions are in alignment to the so-called spiritual answers to it.
Can science actually prove the existence of the soul?
Maybe the reason it's called the Great Mystery is because it's not supposed to be defined. Maybe it's just supposed to be experienced. Sometimes when I'm too busy trying to define it, I miss the experience.
People search for the soul in many different ways. No matter how they look for it or what they call it, the goal remains the same: to unravel a mystery which in the end may simply be a matter of faith.